So James, let's start with a nice big broad question. We talk a lot at Amiculum about the importance of starting to think about strategy early on in product development. So what does early strategic planning mean to you? How would you define it?
When a product gets to market, people make a judgment on it, and they look at it and they say, okay, this is for this kind of patient. I understand it's going to be positioned like this. I look at the price. If I'm a payer or a healthcare system, I make a judgment on whether I think it's good value and whether I want to use it in those particular groups of patients. So that isn't something that just happens the day a product is given approval. The thinking behind that happens many, many years previous. We know drug development's long, right? So, 5, 6, 7, 8 years plus. But in those early stages, it's making those decisions to set the vision, to set the direction for a product. If you want it to be a high value, expensive, premium kind of brand, well, what is it about your product that's going to support that?
And I suppose conversely to that, if you wanted to go for more of a volume market, then that's probably a lot more competitive. So how do you position in that market?
Yeah, exactly. It's that process of deciding early on, what are you going to hang your hat on? What's your play here? And this is early, so you won't have all the answers. Your path will change, and you need to modify along the way. But you have a foundational basis, and that to me, the companies that do that well, that they've ticked the early strategic planning box.
Something else to add into the mix, of course, is one of industry's favourite buzzwords: patient centricity. We see this mentioned a lot, but in early planning, the systems seem to struggle truly integrating the patient input. What are your thoughts about that?
If you can design a study that really does meet the needs of the patients, well, you will probably get better recruitment, you'll probably get better enrollment, you may not need to amend your protocol so much. And all of these things, if you don't do them, are things that will slow down your clinical study and delay your time to market.
Yeah, we've seen that recent data. Well, it's relatively recent data, and they were saying that engaging with patients early can actually equate to 2.5-year launch acceleration versus not engaging with them, and that's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah.
And that's there's 2.5 years of missed patient benefit if you don't do that, and you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ultimately as well. Interesting. How would one move forward? What's the best way to work in this early strategy space where you have a lot of unknowns?
Yeah. I mean, we have clients coming to us with exactly that situation an awful lot of the time, where they've got all these ideas flying around and they just don't know how to structure it to ensure that they're making progress forward. So we can come in and provide a very structured framework to the decision making so that they are ensuring that everything is covered, but we do it in a kind of step-by-step process that the early steps will inform further down the road. But it has to have an element of adaptability in that, because the landscape's not going to stay static. Yeah. So we need to ensure that we're having these kind of feedback loops throughout that, just in case there is a need to course correct. And it's all about bringing all the stakeholders, all the relevant stakeholders to the table early on, just to make sure that they're all coming on that journey together. And that really helps with alignment further down the line as well.
That makes sense. And one of the challenges, I guess, to pick up on something there that we see, certainly with our smaller clients, is they don't always have full, not all functions are fully staffed yet.
No, absolutely not.
If you're a kind of earlier stage clinically focused company, you may not have pricing and access people yet. So,
I mean, even the medical affairs teams can be a team of one.
Yep.
You know, and
Juggling
you're just
everything.
like, okay, how on earth are you supposed to be able to handle the, data generation for the later developed or, near launch products, as well as thinking about all these other possible new candidates. So,
I guess the message is at that early stage, you need to find a way of bringing that in if you don't have it in-house. Not a lot of it necessarily, but you can't just ignore it completely.
Yeah, absolutely. To wrap up, how would you summarise the impact that you think paying more attention to early strategic planning can play for our clients?
So the work that we do in early strategic planning, the value for our biopharma clients comes from, there's several tiers to it, several layers. So it's not just the nuts and bolts. We might do a landscape assessment, looking at unmet needs or disease burden in a new therapy area, or laddering up to even planning, prioritization frameworks or kind of putting a strategic plan together. All of those are sort of pieces, building blocks. So you think, well, okay, once you've got all those together, what do you get out of it? Well, they all move the thinking forward, but they're only part of the puzzle. And the real value comes more at an organizational level when there is that organizational clarity and joined up alignments that the whole team can pull behind and focus on execution to get themselves ready for launch. Because that's the end goal here, is to get the product. We're not doing it for the development for the sake of it. We want to get it onto market as quickly as we can and in as good a state as we can to have maximum patient benefit and also benefit our business. So that to me is the value. Is it's we spoke earlier about potentially reducing development times and the kind of upsides of that. I think that's really where we can come in and help our client teams move forwards. Another layer to that value is confidence. Confidence and clarity. So the kind of process of drug development, there's decision stage gauge, there's governance meetings, and these are things that we can and do support. But they're there for a good reason. But having that clarity earlier will help you get through those governance meetings faster and smoother. Things won't get bounced back. Having that management buy-in and fast approval, it's worthwhile. Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree about having that kind of clear thinking around the development of an asset from an early stage, and to think about it kind of on the flip side. If that early planning is suboptimal, so you have kicked the can down the road, you haven't spent the effort or the focus on ironing out all those critical aspects early on. And so if you wait too long, say you're at mid or late phase 3 stage, and you're still trying to figure out what you want your product to be, there can be really big consequences around that. And if you're only starting to make the decisions, then they become rushed. Your organization then gets pushed into this kind of panic mode, they become reactive, and then the decisions, they become hasty, and they aren't always the best decisions. So what then is the consequence of that? You then see that cross-functional collaboration fractures, everybody goes off and does their own thing, and then from the outside, there is no cohesion in what you are saying or wanting to, how you want to position that product in the real world, and it just becomes noise, and that kind of clear positioning gets lost.
Yeah.
And that's a huge killer for the brand, for the business, and ultimately the patients that would be benefiting from that drug.
Yeah.